A beach in Egypt, September 48 BC. A small boat rows a Roman general ashore, and the men in it stab him in the back in front of his wife, who is watching from the ship.
Pompey the Great, one of the three most powerful men in the world, killed in the shallows by a couple of hired soldiers, who then cut off his head.
And they pickle it and present it in a basket to Julius Caesar when he lands 3 days later, as a welcome gift.
And Caesar weeps. Not out of love, Pompey was his enemy, because those men had just taken his one great political prize off the board.
And watching this whole miscalculation unfold, from exile, out in the desert with a scratch army, is a 21-year-old queen who has just been thrown off her own throne.
And she works out something that nobody else in Egypt has worked out. The court just made itself useless to the most powerful man alive.
Which means the throne is not going to be won in Egypt. It's going to be won in one conversation with one Roman.
Cleopatra VII, and the version everyone knows is a seductress who ruined two great men.
The version that's actually in the sources is a multilingual head of state doing crisis management on an empire in terminal decline and buying it 20 more years than it had any right to.
Let's clear up the basics first, because almost everything popular about her is wrong. She's not ethnically Egyptian in the way people assume.
She's Macedonian Greek. The Ptolemies descend from one of Alexander the Great's generals who took Egypt when the empire was divided after his death.
300 years earlier, and in all that time, almost none of them bothered to learn the Egyptian language.
She did. Plutarch says she was the first of her line to speak it and lists something like 8 or 9 languages she handled without interpreters.
Ethiopian, Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, Syriac, Parthian. She negotiated directly, which was unheard of.
And on the looks question, Plutarch is unusually blunt. He says her beauty in itself was not incomparable.
What he says was irresistible was her presence, her voice, and the way she could shift her manner to whoever she was talking to.
She was charming in the political sense, which is a much rarer and more dangerous skill than being attractive.
Now the family, and I want to be careful not to make it a joke because it explains the paranoia.
The Ptolemies married their siblings generation after generation, following Egyptian royal precedent, and they killed each other constantly.
Her father drove out his own daughter. Her older sister seized the throne and was later executed on Cleopatra's watch. 2 of her brothers die in the fight for power.
So when she is ruthless later, understand the school she came up in. Losing meant dying. It always had.
And the state she inherits in 51 BC is in serious trouble, which is the part people never mention.
Egypt is still fabulously rich. The grain of the Nile Valley feeds a large part of the Mediterranean. But politically, it's already a Roman client.
Her father had been driven out and had to bribe his way back onto the throne with Roman help.
Borrowing colossal sums from a Roman financier at brutal interest, and then handing him control of Egyptian revenues to collect it.
So she inherits a throne, a famine risk from low Nile floods, and a debt that makes her a debtor to Roman politics.
She's about 18. She's co-ruler with her 10-year-old brother, whom she's also technically married to.
And she immediately starts governing as if the brother doesn't exist. Her name alone on documents, her face alone on coins.
Which the boys' advisors, the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achilles, the tutor Theodotus, will not tolerate because their power runs through him.
So they push her out, and that's the exile she's sitting in when Pompey gets murdered.
Now the carpet, which is the most famous thing about her, and also probably not a carpet.
Plutarch describes a bed sack, a sort of linen bag for bedding. She's smuggled through a harbor blockade past her brother's soldiers and carried into Caesar's rooms.
And the point of the story isn't romance. It's that she got to Caesar first, in person, alone, before her brother's faction could put their case.
She won that throne with logistics and timing. Everything else came after the meeting she made sure she was in the room for.
What follows is the Alexandrian War. Caesar's small force is besieged in the palace quarter by the brothers' army.
This is where the library gets damaged, incidentally. Caesar fires the ships in the harbor and the fire spreads to warehouses near the docks.
How badly is genuinely disputed, but it's not a deliberate act of destruction, it's collateral in a street fight.
Reinforcements arrive, the brothers' army loses, and the boy drowns in the Nile trying to escape.
And Cleopatra is queen again, married now to an even younger brother and pregnant with Caesar's son.
Caesarion. And that child is the most explosive political object in the Mediterranean.
Because Caesar has no legitimate Roman son, he has a great-nephew he adopts in his will, Octavian.
And a boy in Alexandria who is, biologically, the only son he ever had.
She goes to Rome, lives in his villa across the Tiber. He puts a golden statue of her in the Temple of Venus.
Which for conservative Roman senators is an outrage. A foreign queen in a city that overthrew its last king 5 centuries ago and has been paranoid about kingship ever since.
And part of what makes the assassination happen is that fear, that Caesar wants a crown and an Eastern dynasty and a son to give it to.
The Ides of March, 44 BC. She's in Rome when it happens, and she gets out fast.
Back to Egypt, her younger brother conveniently dies, almost certainly poisoned, and she elevates her 3-year-old son as co-ruler.
Then, the Roman world splits again. Octavian in the west, Mark Antony in the east.
And Antony summons her to Tarsus in 41 BC to explain which side she'd backed in the Civil War.
Which is a summons to answer charges, and she turns it into theater so complete that it's still being staged 2,000 years later.
She arrives up the river on a barge with gilded stern, purple sails, silver oars keeping time to flutes, dressed as Aphrodite.
And crucially, she doesn't disembark. She invites him aboard, so the interrogation happens on her ground, at her table, on her terms.
That's not seduction, that's staging. She converted a legal summons into a state visit before a word was spoken.
And what she needs from Antony is straightforward: protection, the elimination of rival claimants, and territory.
And what he needs from her is money and grain and a naval base for a war against Parthia. It's a partnership before it's anything else.
Twins, then a third child. And Antony marries Octavian's sister in the middle of all this for political reasons, which tells you the relationship wasn't a simple romance.
Then 34 BC and the mistake, the donations of Alexandria.
A ceremony in the gymnasium of Alexandria. Antony on a golden throne, Cleopatra dressed as Isis, and the children handed kingdoms.
Armenia, Media, Parthia, much of which Rome doesn't control and some of which Antony hasn't conquered.
And Caesarion is publicly proclaimed the true son of Julius Caesar.
Which is a direct attack on Octavian's entire legitimacy. His whole claim is being Caesar's heir.
And Octavian was the best propagandist in Roman history. They handed him his weapon, gift-wrapped.
Wishfully, he gets hold of Antony's will, illegally from the Vestal Virgins, and reads selected parts aloud in the Senate.
Antony wants to be buried in Alexandria, not Rome. He's confirming the donations to the children.
And the message writes itself. A Roman general has been captured by an Eastern queen and intends to move the capital.
And then the masterstroke. Rome declares war on Cleopatra, not on Antony.
So it isn't a civil war, which Romans were sick of. It's a foreign war against a decadent Oriental monarchy.
And Antony either fights beside her and confirms the story, or abandons her and loses his money and fleet.
Actium, 31 BC, a naval battle off the west coast of Greece.
And it's less a battle than a failed escape. Their fleet is undermanned, malaria and desertion in the camp, and blockaded by Agrippa, who was the real military talent on the other side.
Cleopatra breaks out with her squadron and the treasury. Antony follows her.
And the hostile sources make that a love-struck man abandoning his men. It looks a lot more like a planned breakout that only partly worked.
Either way, the rest of the fleet surrenders and the army goes over within days.
Then, the following summer, Octavian arrives at Alexandria, and there's essentially no resistance left.
Antony kills himself on a false report that she's already dead. He's carried, dying, to the mausoleum she's barricaded herself in and hauled up through a window.
And then she negotiates for 9 days. That's the part I find most impressive.
Trying to secure the throne for her children, working out exactly what Octavian intends.
And the moment she understands she's meant to be walked through Rome in a triumph, in chains, she ends it on her own terms.
The asp is almost certainly a legend. A cobra is slow and unreliable, and there was no mark on her.
A prepared poison is far more likely. She had, according to the sources, spent considerable time studying exactly this question.
30 BC. She's 39, and Caesarion is hunted down and killed, Octavian's advisor supposedly quoting the line that it's bad to have too many Caesars.
The other 3 children are raised in Rome by Octavian's sister, which is an odd mercy. The daughter later becomes a queen in North Africa.
And Egypt stops being a kingdom. It becomes the personal property of the emperor, and its grain feeds Rome for centuries.
So, the verdict. Because the seductor's story is the enemy's version, and we've been repeating it for 2 millennia.
She ran a solvent state through famine and Roman civil war. She backed 2 Romans, and both times she backed the man who looked certain to win.
And the second time she was wrong by a margin she couldn't control. Actium turned on ships and disease and a better admiral.
Here's the moral. She played the only hand available to a small, rich country next to a huge, armed one. Attach yourself to the strongest patron.
And that strategy works right up until the day the patrons stop competing with each other.
The moment Rome had one master, there was nothing left to play off. Her survival depended on their division, and their division ended. This was History But Better podcast, episode 5.